The morning mist hung low over the forest like a soft blanket when Catherine first opened her eyes. She lay in her shelter made of branches and leaves, listening to the sounds of earth waking up around her. Birds sang their morning songs, and somewhere nearby a stream bubbled over smooth rocks. Her two dragons were already awake, their large bodies pressed against the sides of her shelter for warmth. Catherine sat up slowly and stretched her arms above her head. Her silver eyes adjusted quickly to the dim light inside the shelter. She was an elf, though no human on this planet knew what that truly meant. Her people came from a world called Etherian, where magic flowed through everything like water through a river. She had pointed ears that could hear a mouse breathing from 50 feet away, and her sense of smell was sharp enough to detect rain. Coming from miles away, 3 months had passed since her ship crashed in these woods. The vessel had been damaged beyond any hope of repair during an unexpected meteor storm. Catherine had tried everything to fix the communication systems, but the technology was too broken. She had no way to contact her people and no way to go home. So she did what any survivor would do. She adapted. The shelter she built was simple but effective. She had woven branches together and covered them with large leaves to keep out the rain. Inside, she had made a bed from soft moss and dried grass. It was not the floating crystal palace she had lived in back home, but it kept her safe and dry. Her dragons Ember and Frost crawled out of the shelter first. They were still young, only 2 years old, but already they were larger than the biggest horses Catherine had seen in the nearby town. Ember was covered in red scales that shimmered like rubies in the sunlight. When he was happy or excited, small puffs of smoke would drift from his nostrils. Frost was the opposite, with scales of deep blue that sometimes looked purple in certain light. He had the ability to lower the temperature around him and often left small patches of ice wherever he walked. Catherine had raised both dragons from eggs. She found them abandoned on her homeworld and took them in when no one else would. They imprinted on her immediately and followed her everywhere. When her ship crashed on Earth, they were with her, and they had stayed by her side every single day since. The morning air was cool and fresh as Catherine stepped out of the shelter. She wore clothes she had made herself from animal hides and plant fibers. Her long white hair was braided down her back to keep it out of her way. She looked almost human except for the pointed ears and the silver color of her eyes that seemed to glow slightly in the shadows. She walked to the stream to wash her face. The cold water felt good against her skin. Ember and Frost drank deeply from the stream, then wandered off to hunt for their breakfast. They were good hunters and always brought back enough food for themselves. Catherine ate mostly fruits, nuts, and vegetables she found in the forest. Sometimes she caught fish from the stream. After washing up, Catherine decided to walk deeper into the forest. She had been exploring the area slowly over the past 3 months, learning the paths and the places where certain plants grew. She needed to find more herbs for medicine and maybe some berries if she was lucky. The forest was beautiful in the morning light. Sunbeams broke through the leaves above and created patterns on the ground. Catherine walked quietly, her feet barely making a sound on the soft earth. This was one thing she loved about Earth. The forests here were peaceful and full of life. They reminded her of home in some ways, though the trees were different and the animals were species she had never seen before. She had been walking for about an hour when she heard something unusual. At first she thought it was an animal in pain, but then she realized it was a human voice. Someone was crying. The sound was raw and filled with deep sadness. It made her chest feel tight. Catherine knew she should probably avoid humans. She had watched the nearby town from a distance and learned that people here would be frightened of her, and especially of her dragons. But something about the crying pulled at her heart. She had felt that kind of pain before, and she knew how terrible it was to suffer alone. She moved quietly through the trees, following the sound. Ember and Frost appeared beside her, sensing her change in mood. She put a hand on each of their heads and whispered for them to be calm and gentle. They understood and walked softly behind her. Through the trees, Catherine saw a small clearing with a fallen log. A man sat on the log with his face in his hands. His shoulders shook as he cried. He looked to be in his 40s with brown hair that was turning gray at the sides. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a jacket, and in his hands he held a small photograph. Catherine hesitated at the edge of the clearing. She could still turn around and leave him alone, but the sound of his crying hurt something inside her. She had been alone for 3 months with only her dragons for company. She had not spoken to another thinking being in all that time, and this man looked like he needed someone, anyone, to just be there with him. She took a deep breath and stepped into the clearing. The man did not notice her at first. He was too lost in his grief. But Ember shifted his weight and a branch cracked under his massive foot. The sound made the man look up. His eyes went wide when he saw her. They went even wider when he saw the two dragons standing behind her. For a moment, Catherine thought he might run or scream, but he just stared, too shocked or too tired to react. Catherine raised her hand slowly to show she meant no harm. She spoke in English, words she had learned from listening to people in town from far away. "I'm sorry to disturb you." I heard crying. The man blinked several times like he thought he might be dreaming. His voice came out rough and broken. "What are you?" "My name is Catherine. I'm not from this world. I come from far away." The man looked at her pointed ears, then at the dragons, then back at her face. "Those are dragons. Real dragons, yes, they are real. They will not hurt you." I promise. The man seemed to accept this. Maybe he was too sad to care about the impossibility of what he was seeing. He looked back down at the photograph in his hands. His voice was barely a whisper. "My wife died 6 months ago. Cancer. It was fast." Catherine felt his pain like a physical weight in the air. She had lost people too. She knew that particular kind of emptiness. She moved closer slowly and sat down on the log, keeping a respectful distance between them. "I'm very sorry. Loss is hard." The man wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Today would have been our anniversary. 25 years. She loved this spot. She used to come here to watch the sunrise. It is a beautiful place," Catherine said softly. They sat in silence for a while. Ember and Frost settled down on the ground nearby. The dragons seemed to understand that this was a sad moment, and they needed to be quiet and gentle. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky and birds continued their songs in the trees around them. Finally, the man spoke again. "My name is Henry." "Hello, Henry, I am Catherine. Why are you here on Earth?" "My ship crashed in these woods 3 months ago. I cannot repair it, so I stay here now." Henry looked at her with tired eyes. "Are you alone?" "Just me and my dragons. That must be lonely." "Sometimes, yes, but they are good company." Henry stared at Ember and Frost for a long moment, then he did something unexpected. He stood up slowly and walked toward the red dragon. Catherine tensed, ready to call Ember back if needed, but the dragon just watched Henry with calm golden eyes. Henry reached out his hand carefully. "Can I touch him?" "His name is Ember, you can try. He is gentle with people who are gentle with him." Henry placed his hand on Ember's massive head. The dragon's scales were warm and smooth. Ember rumbled softly, a sound like distant thunder, and pressed his head against Henry's palm. A small smile appeared on Henry's face. It was the first smile Catherine had seen from him. Henry stood there with his hand on Ember's head for a long time. The warmth from the dragon's scales seemed to spread through his whole body. It was the first time in months that he had felt anything other than cold emptiness inside his chest. Ember made a sound like a cat purring, but much deeper and more powerful. Small wisps of smoke drifted from his nostrils and disappeared into the morning air. Catherine watched them carefully. She had not expected Henry to be so calm around her dragons. Most creatures, even on her own world, were frightened when they first saw Ember and Frost. But Henry seemed too tired from grief to be afraid. Or maybe he just needed something to focus on besides his pain. "This is incredible," Henry said quietly. "I never thought I would see something like this." "Real dragons, they are very real," Catherine replied. "Frost is shy, but he will warm up to you if you are patient." As if hearing his name, the blue dragon lifted his head and looked at Henry. His eyes were a lighter shade of blue than his scales, almost like ice. Frost stood up slowly and walked over to where Henry stood. He was slightly larger than Ember, and his movements were more careful and deliberate. Henry turned to face Frost and held out his hand again. The blue dragon sniffed it carefully, then pressed his snout against Henry's palm. The scales were cooler than Ember's, but still pleasant to touch. Henry felt some of the tension leave his shoulders as he stroked Frost's head. "They like you," Catherine said with a small smile. "That is good. They are very good at sensing what kind of person someone is." "What do you mean?" "Dragons can feel emotions in ways humans cannot. They know when someone has a good heart or a bad heart. They trust you because you are a good person." Henry felt tears start to form in his eyes again, but this time they were different. They were not tears of pain, but tears of something else. Maybe gratitude or relief. I do not feel like a good person lately. I feel angry and lost. Catherine nodded. That is normal when you lose someone you love. On my world, we say that grief is love with nowhere to go. You loved your wife very much, so now you have all that love inside you with no way to give it to her. That is exactly how it feels, Henry said, like I am full of something I cannot use anymore. They returned to the fallen log and sat down together. The dragons settled nearby, forming a protective circle around them. Catherine pulled some berries from a pouch at her side and offered them to Henry. He took a few and ate them slowly. They were sweet and tasted like nothing he had eaten before. These are from my world, Catherine explained. I brought seeds with me and planted them near my shelter. They grow faster here than they did at home. Everything about this is impossible, Henry said. But I am too tired to question it. Maybe I am dreaming. You're not dreaming. I am real. The dragons are real. Your pain is real too. Henry ate another berry and looked at the photograph in his other hand. Her name was Lisa. We met in college. She was studying art, and I was studying history. We were so young and stupid and completely in love. Catherine listened without interrupting. She had learned that sometimes people just needed someone to hear their stories. We got married right after graduation, Henry continued. Everyone said we were too young, but we did not care. We bought a small house and filled it with books and paintings and all the things we loved. We never had children. Lisa could not have them, and we were okay with that. We had each other, and that was enough. She sounds like a wonderful person. She was the best person I ever knew. When she got sick, she never complained, not once. Even when the pain was terrible, she would smile and tell me she was fine. She did not want me to worry, but you worried anyway. Of course I did. I watched her get weaker every day, and I could not do anything to stop it. The doctors tried everything, but the cancer was too aggressive. She died at home with me holding her hand. Her last words were, "Thank you for everything." Henry stopped talking and wiped his eyes. Catherine reached over and placed her hand on his shoulder. She did not say anything, because there were no words that could make his pain go away. She just sat with him and let him feel what he needed to feel. After a while, Henry asked her a question. "Have you lost someone you loved?" "Yes," Catherine said quietly. His name was Aldrich. He was a warrior and a scholar. We were bonded, which in my culture is like being married but deeper. We could feel each other's emotions even when we were far apart. What happened to him? Our city was attacked by raiders from the Dark Lands. They came in the night with weapons and fire. Aldrich led the defense while I helped evacuate the civilians. He fought bravely and saved many lives. But he was wounded badly. By the time I got back to him, it was too late. "I am sorry," Henry said. "How long ago was this?" 15 years. The pain is not as sharp now, but it never completely goes away. I think of him often and I still miss him. Does it get easier? Yes and no. You learn to live with it. The sadness becomes part of you, but it does not control you anymore. You find new reasons to keep going. For me, it was these two, Catherine said, gesturing to Ember and Frost. I found their eggs abandoned and alone. Raising them gave me purpose again. Henry looked at the dragons with new understanding. So they saved you in a way? Yes. They saved me. And maybe I saved them too. We needed each other. They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer. The sun was higher now and the forest was fully awake with activity. Squirrels chased each other through the trees and insects buzzed among the flowers growing near the clearing. "Can I ask you something?" Henry said. "Why did you come over here when you heard me crying? You could have just left me alone." Catherine thought about her answer for a moment. "I have been alone for 3 months with only my dragons to talk to. I miss having conversations with someone who can talk back. But also, I know what it is like to suffer alone. No one should have to do that if they do not have to. Thank you for that. Most people do not know what to say to me anymore. They try to make me feel better with empty words, or they avoid me because my sadness makes them uncomfortable. But you just sat with me. That means more than you know. I am glad I could help even in a small way." Henry stood up and stretched his legs. He looked at his watch and sighed. I should get back to town. I have things I need to do today. But can I come back here? Maybe next week? Catherine smiled. You are welcome here anytime you want. I am usually nearby during the day. Just call my name and I will hear you. Even from far away? My ears are very good. Much better than human ears. Henry laughed a little. Of course they are. You are an elf with dragons. Why would I expect anything normal? He walked over to Ember and Frost and petted them both one more time. The dragons rumbled happily and Frost even made a small sound like a chirp. Then Henry turned to Catherine and held out his hand. She stood and shook it. Her grip was firm and her skin was warmer than he expected. Thank you, Catherine. For everything. I feel better than I have in a long time. I am glad, Henry. I will see you next week. Henry walked away through the trees. He turned back once to wave and Catherine waved back. Ember and Frost watched him go with curious eyes. When he was out of sight, Catherine sat back down on the log and took a deep breath. She had not realized how much she missed talking to someone until now. That was a good thing we did, she said to her dragons. He needed us today. Ember nuzzled her shoulder and Frost laid his head in her lap. They stayed there in the clearing for a while longer, enjoying the warmth of the sun and the peace of the forest. Catherine felt lighter somehow, like helping Henry had also helped her in a way she had not expected. Maybe they both needed each other. The week passed slowly for Catherine. She spent her days exploring the forest, gathering food, and taking care of Ember and Frost. But she found herself thinking about Henry often. She wondered how he was doing and if he would really come back like he said he would. Part of her worried that he might have decided it was all too strange and would stay away, and the 7th day, Catherine woke up early and walked to the clearing where she had met Henry. She was not sure why. She felt the need to be there. Maybe it was hope, or maybe it was just the desire for company. Either way, she sat down on the same fallen log and waited. Ember and Frost sensed her mood and stayed close to her. Ember laid his head on her lap and she scratched behind his ear ridges, the spots she knew he loved. Frost stretched out in a patch of sunlight and closed his eyes, but Catherine could tell he was still alert and listening to everything around them. The morning sun climbed higher and Catherine started to think that maybe Henry was not coming. She felt a small disappointment settle in her chest, but she understood. Sometimes people needed more time or they changed their minds. She was about to stand up and leave when she heard footsteps approaching through the trees. Henry appeared in the clearing carrying a backpack. He looked better than he had the week before. His eyes were clearer and he had shaved. When he saw Catherine sitting there with her dragons, he smiled. A real genuine smile that reached his eyes. You came back, Catherine said, unable to hide the happiness in her voice. I said I would, Henry replied. I am a man of my word. He walked over and sat down beside her on the log. Ember immediately moved to greet him, pushing his large head against Henry's chest like an oversized puppy. Henry laughed and wrapped his arms around the dragon's neck. Frost opened one eye, assessed that everything was safe, and went back to his sunbathing. I brought some things, Henry said, pulling the backpack around. He opened it and took out a thermos and some containers. I made coffee and brought sandwiches. I was not sure if you could eat human food, but I thought I would try. Catherine took the thermos he offered and opened it. The smell of coffee hit her nose and she smiled. We have something similar on my world. I can eat most human foods. Thank you for thinking of me. They ate together in comfortable silence for a while. The sandwiches were simple, just bread and cheese and vegetables, but they tasted wonderful to Catherine. She had been eating mostly foraged foods for months, and the prepared meal was a nice change. How have you been? Henry asked after a while. Good. Quiet. I have been exploring more of the forest. There are many interesting plants here that I have never seen before. Some of them have healing properties. Are you some kind of doctor? Not exactly. On my world, I was a scholar. I studied plants and their uses. Medicine, food, materials for building. Plants can do almost anything if you know how to use them correctly. That is fascinating. Lisa would have loved talking to you. She was always bringing home strange plants from the garden store and trying to grow them. Catherine saw the sadness flicker across his face, but it was softer than before, less sharp. Tell me about her garden, she said gently. Henry's face brightened a little. Oh, it was chaos. Beautiful chaos, but chaos. She had no system or organization. She just planted things wherever she thought they would look pretty. We had roses next to vegetables next to wildflowers. It should not have worked, but somehow it did. The whole backyard was this explosion of color. It sounds wonderful. It was. I have not taken care of it much since she died. I do not know what to do with it. Every time I go out there, I just feel sad. Catherine thought for a moment. Maybe you could think of it differently. The garden was something she loved. Taking care of it could be a way to honor her memory. You do not have to do it all at once. Just a little bit at a time. Henry considered this. I suppose you are right. She would be mad at me for letting it get overgrown. They finished eating and Henry packed the containers back into his backpack. He pulled out one more thing, a book with a worn cover. I brought this to read to you if you want. It is poetry. Lisa loved poetry. I would like that, Catherine said. Henry opened the book and began to read. His voice was steady and clear as he spoke the words. The poems were about nature and love and loss and hope. Catherine closed her eyes and listened. Ember and Frost both moved closer, drawn by the soothing sound of Henry's voice. After a few poems, Henry stopped and looked at Catherine. Can I ask you about your world? I have been curious all week, of course. What do you want to know? Everything. What is it like? How is it different from Earth? Catherine leaned back against the log and looked up at the sky through the tree branches. My world is called Etherian. It is very different from here. We have floating cities held up by crystal formations that channel magical energy. The forests are alive in ways that Earth forests are not. The trees can communicate with each other through their roots, and sometimes they sing at night. Trees that sing? Henry said with wonder in his voice. Yes, it is beautiful. Like music, but also like language. We elves can understand some of it if we listen carefully. They share information about weather and dangers and where resources can be found. That is amazing. What about your people? What are elves like? Catherine smiled. We are not so different from humans in many ways. We love and laugh, and sometimes we fight. We build communities and create art and tell stories. The main differences are physical. We live much longer, several hundred years usually. We have stronger senses and we can use magic naturally while humans here cannot. How old are you, if you do not mind me asking? I am 93 years old. Still young by elf standards. Henry's eyes went wide. You are 93? You do not look older than 25. Catherine laughed. Thank you. We age much slower than humans. I will look like this for at least another century. What about the dragons? Where do they come from? Dragons exist on many worlds. Ember and Frost are from Etherian. I found their eggs abandoned in a cave. Their mother had been killed by hunters. I could not leave them to die, so I took them home and raised them. They bonded with me, and now we are family. They are lucky to have you. I am lucky to have them. They kept me sane after Aldrich died. When you lose someone you love, you need something to keep you going. They were that something for me. Henry nodded slowly. Maybe I need to find my something. I have just been going through the motions for months. Work, home, sleep, repeat. Nothing feels meaningful anymore. Catherine reached over and placed her hand on his. It takes time. You cannot rush grief, but you also cannot let it consume you completely. Lisa would want you to live, not just exist. I know you are right. It is just hard. Of course it is hard. If it was easy, it would mean she did not matter. The difficulty is proof of how much you loved her. They sat together as the sun moved across the sky. Henry read more poems and Catherine told him stories about Etherian. She described the floating markets where merchants sold crystals and enchanted items. She told him about the great libraries that contained knowledge from thousands of years. She spoke of festivals where everyone danced under 3 moons. Henry listened to everything with fascination. For the first time since Lisa died, he felt genuinely interested in something. Catherine's stories took him out of his own sadness and showed him that the universe was bigger and stranger and more wonderful than he had ever imagined. As the afternoon wore on, Henry realized he needed to head back. He stood up reluctantly and packed his things. Thank you for today, he said. This has been the best day I have had in a very long time. You are welcome here always, Catherine replied. Next time maybe you can tell me more about human culture. I still have much to learn about this world. It is a deal. Henry said goodbye to Ember and Frost, who both seemed sad to see him go. Then he turned to Catherine and surprised her by pulling her into a hug. She stiffened for a moment, then relaxed and hugged him back. It had been a long time since anyone had hugged her. "Thank you, Catherine. For everything. Be safe, Henry." He walked away through the trees, and Catherine watched until he disappeared from sight. She felt warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the sun. Maybe she had found her something too. A friend who needed her as much as she needed him. The weeks turned into months, and Henry's visits became a regular part of Catherine's life. He came every week, sometimes twice a week, always bringing food or books or small gifts. He brought her a warm blanket when the weather turned cold. He brought her tools when he noticed her shelter needed repairs. He brought her a journal and pens so she could write down her thoughts and memories of home. Catherine looked forward to each visit more than she wanted to admit. The loneliness she had felt since crashing on Earth was slowly fading. Having a friend made everything better. The forest felt less empty and the days felt less long. Even Ember and Frost seemed happier. They recognized the sound of Henry's footsteps now and would rush to greet him whenever he arrived. One day, Henry came with a different expression on his face. He looked nervous and excited at the same time. He sat down on their usual log and pulled out his phone. Catherine had seen phones before from watching the town, but she had never used one. "I want to show you something," Henry said. He tapped the screen a few times, then turned it toward her. "I have been doing research about dragons and elves and other worlds. There are so many stories from different cultures about beings like you. I do not think you are the first visitor Earth has had." Catherine looked at the images on the small screen. They showed ancient drawings and carvings of creatures with pointed ears and large winged beasts. "Really?" she said with surprise. "Really? Look at this one. This is from ancient Ireland. They called them the Tuatha Deo Danann. They were described as a magical race with pointed ears who could do impossible things. And this one is from Japan. They have stories of dragons that are wise and powerful. Almost every culture has legends like this. Maybe my people have visited Earth before. Our ships have been traveling between worlds for thousands of years. It is possible that some crashed here long ago." Henry's eyes lit up. That would explain so much. All these myths and legends might actually be based on real events. "This is incredible." Catherine smiled at his enthusiasm. It reminded her of scholars back home who would get excited about new discoveries. "You like learning new things," she observed. "I used to. I was a history professor before I retired. I spent my whole career studying ancient civilizations and trying to understand how people lived in the past. But after Lisa died, I lost interest in everything. Talking with you has reminded me why I loved it in the first place. I am glad. Everyone needs something they are passionate about." Henry put his phone away and pulled out a bag of apples. He had learned that Catherine loved Earth apples. They were similar to a fruit on her world, but sweeter. They ate together while Ember and Frost played in the clearing. The dragons had grown even larger over the past months. Ember could now breathe small flames instead of just smoke, and Frost could create patches of ice big enough to walk on. "Can I ask you something personal?" Henry said after a while. "Do you ever regret coming to Earth? If you could go home right now, would you?" Catherine thought carefully before answering. "I miss my world. I miss my friends and my family and the floating cities and singing trees, but I do not regret being here. This experience has taught me things I never would have learned at home, and I have met you, and that has been worth the loneliness." Henry felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You have helped me more than you know. Before I met you, I was just going through the motions of living. I was surviving, but not really alive. You reminded me that there is still beauty and wonder in the world. You did the same for me. I thought I would be alone forever on this planet. Having a friend has made all the difference." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. It had become their pattern. Sometimes they talked for hours, and sometimes they just sat together without needing words. Both were equally valuable. Henry broke the silence eventually. "I have been thinking about what you said about Lisa's garden. I started working on it last week. Just a little bit at a time, like you suggested. It felt good to get my hands in the dirt again. I think you were right. It does not make me as sad as I thought it would. That is wonderful, Henry. I am proud of you. I was wondering if maybe you would want to come see it sometime, and before you say it is too dangerous, I have thought it through. You could come at night when no one is around. I live on the edge of town, so there are no close neighbors. You could see what plants humans grow, and maybe you could give me advice on how to take care of them better." Catherine felt torn. Part of her wanted to see more of human civilization, and especially to see something that Lisa had loved. But the other part was nervous. What if someone saw her? What if she caused problems for Henry? I would like to see it, she said slowly. But are you sure it is safe? I am sure. I have been planning it for a week. The house behind mine is empty. No one will see you. And even if they did, I do not care anymore. You are my friend, and I am not going to hide that. Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. Okay. I will come, but Ember and Frost must stay here. They are too large and too noticeable, that is fine. When do you want to come? Tonight, Henry grinned. Tonight it is. That evening, after the sun had set, Catherine made her way through the forest toward the town. She had never been this close to human buildings before. The lights from the houses looked strange and artificial compared to the natural glow of bioluminescent plants back home. She could hear sounds of televisions and cars and people talking inside their homes. She found Henry's house easily. He had described it perfectly. It was a small single-story building with a large backyard. Henry was waiting for her by the back fence. He opened the gate and she slipped inside quickly. Welcome to my home, Henry said quietly. Catherine looked around with wide eyes. The backyard was bigger than she expected. Even in the darkness, she could see the shapes of plants everywhere. Flowers lined the fence and vegetable beds were arranged in no particular order, just like Henry had described. In the center was a small pond with lily pads floating on the surface. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way. Henry had set up some small solar lights along the paths so they could see without attracting attention. He walked her through the garden, pointing out different plants and telling her stories about each one. This rosebush was Lisa's favorite. This tomato plant produces the sweetest tomatoes you have ever tasted. These wildflowers attract butterflies in the summer. Catherine knelt down and touched the soil. It was rich and healthy. Your wife knew what she was doing. This is good earth. She always said happy plants come from happy soil. They spent over an hour in the garden. Catherine gave Henry advice on pruning and watering, and which plants would grow well together. She showed him techniques from her world that could help plants grow stronger. Henry listened carefully and asked questions and took notes on his phone. Eventually, they sat down on a bench near the pond. The night was cool and quiet except for the sound of crickets and the occasional car passing on the distant road. Catherine looked up at the stars. They were the same stars she could see from the forest, but somehow they looked different from here. Do you see your home star up there? Henry asked. No, Etherian is too far away. It would take the fastest Earth telescope years to see it, even if they knew where to look. That makes me sad. You are so far from home. Distance is relative. I may be far in space, but I have found connection here. That matters more than physical distance, Henry smiled. You always know the right thing to say. I learned from a good teacher. You have taught me much about being human and about healing from loss. We have taught each other. They sat together under the stars for a long time. Catherine felt peaceful in a way she had not felt since leaving her world. This small garden with this grieving man had become a kind of home. Not the home she had lost, but a new home. Different, but just as real. Eventually, Catherine knew she needed to return to the forest before dawn. Henry walked her to the back fence and they said goodbye. Thank you for sharing this with me, Catherine said. Your wife would be proud of how you are caring for her garden. Thank you for coming. This meant a lot to me. Catherine slipped back into the darkness of the forest. As she walked back to her shelter, she thought about how strange life was. She had crashed on an alien planet, lost and alone, and somehow she had found exactly what she needed. A friend who understood loss. A place that felt safe. A purpose that gave her days meaning. Maybe the universe had not been cruel after all. Maybe it had been kind in a way she had not expected. 6 months had passed since Catherine first met Henry in the forest. The seasons had changed and autumn was giving way to winter. The trees were losing their leaves and the air had a sharp cold bite to it. Catherine had prepared her shelter for the colder months ahead, adding extra layers of insulation and gathering stores of food that would last through the snow. Henry visited more frequently now, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. He had retired from his part-time work at the local college and had more free time. He told Catherine it was because he wanted to help her prepare for winter, but she suspected it was also because he needed the company. As much as she did, on a cold morning in early December, Henry arrived at the clearing with a strange expression on his face. He looked worried but also determined. Catherine noticed immediately. She had become good at reading his moods over the months of friendship. "What is wrong?" she asked as soon as he sat down. Henry took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something, and I am not sure how you will react. There is a big storm coming. The weather service says it will be the worst winter storm in 20 years. Heavy snow, ice, freezing temperatures. It is going to hit in 2 days. I will be fine," Catherine said. "I have survived worse on my world." Henry shook his head. "Catherine, you do not understand how bad human winter storms can be here. Your shelter is good, but it might not be enough. The temperature could drop below 0. The snow could bury your shelter. I'm worried about you. Ember and frost will keep me warm. Dragon body heat is very efficient. What if something happens to them? What if they need to hunt but cannot because of the storm?" Henry's voice was rising with anxiety. "I have been thinking about this for days, and I cannot let you stay out here during this storm. I want you to come stay at my house until it passes." Catherine stared at him in surprise. "Your house? But what about people seeing me? I do not care anymore. Your safety is more important than what my neighbors might think. The house behind mine is still empty, and the other neighbors keep to themselves. We can be careful. Please, Catherine. I would never forgive myself if something happened to you." Catherine saw the genuine fear in his eyes. She realized that she had become as important to him as he had become to her. But there was a problem. "I cannot leave Ember and Frost alone. Bring them too." "Henry, what are you saying?" "They are dragons. They are huge. Where would they even stay? My garage, it is big and insulated. I never park my car in there anyway. I use it for storage, but I can clear it out. There is plenty of room for 2 dragons. This is crazy." "Maybe, but I am not leaving you out here to freeze. All 3 of you are coming to my house, and that is final." Catherine felt something warm bloom in her chest. No one except Aldrich had ever cared about her safety this much. She reached over and took Henry's hand. "Thank you. We will come." The relief on Henry's face was immediate. "Good. We should start moving things today. Bring whatever you need. Food, clothes, anything important." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Catherine packed her few belongings while Henry cleared out his garage. He set up heat lamps and brought in blankets and made sure there was plenty of space for the dragons to move around. Ember and Frost seemed confused about what was happening, but they trusted Catherine and followed her instructions. That evening, as the sun was setting, they made the journey to Henry's house. Catherine wore a heavy cloak with a hood that hid her pointed ears. Ember and Frost stayed close to her, moving quietly through the trees. They entered the backyard through the gate, and Henry quickly ushered them into the garage. The dragons explored their new temporary home with curiosity. The garage was warm and dry and bigger than Catherine's shelter. There were windows high up that let in natural light. Ember settled into one corner while Frost claimed another. Both seemed content. Henry showed Catherine to the spare bedroom. It had been Lisa's art studio, but he had converted it back into a bedroom. The bed was made with fresh sheets and there were towels laid out on the dresser. The room was simple but comfortable. "This is too much," Catherine said softly. "It is not enough," Henry replied. "You have given me my life back. The least I can do is give you a warm place to stay for a few days." That night, Catherine experienced things she had not had in months. A hot shower with running water, a soft bed with warm blankets, a roof that did not leak or let in drafts. She lay in bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a human house, the hum of the heater, the creak of floorboards. Somewhere in the distance, a clock was ticking. She thought about how much her life had changed in 6 months. She had gone from being completely alone to having a best friend. She had gone from sleeping on moss to sleeping in a real bed. She had gone from wondering if she would survive to feeling genuinely happy. The next morning, Henry made breakfast. Real human food cooked on a stove. Eggs and toast and fruit. They ate together at the kitchen table like it was the most normal thing in the world. An elf and a human sharing a meal while 2 dragons dozed in the garage. The storm arrived that afternoon just like the weather service predicted. Snow began falling thick and fast. The wind howled around the house and the temperature dropped rapidly. Catherine stood by the window and watched in amazement. She had seen snow before, but never like this. Within hours, everything was buried under white. "This is incredible," she said. Henry came to stand beside her. "This is exactly why I was worried. Your shelter would have been completely covered by now. You might not have been able to get out. You were right to insist I come here. Thank you for caring about me." "Of course I care about you. You are my best friend." They spent the storm days in comfortable companionship. Henry taught Catherine how to use the television, and they watched movies together. He showed her how to cook human food, and she showed him techniques from her world. They read books and talked for hours about everything and nothing. Ember and Frost were content in the garage. Henry checked on them frequently and made sure they had enough food and water. The dragons seemed to understand that this was temporary, and they were patient. Sometimes Henry would sit with them and read out loud. Both dragons would listen with their heads on their paws, perfectly still. On the third day, the storm finally passed. The sun came out and everything sparkled under a thick blanket of snow. Henry and Catherine went outside to see the damage. Trees had fallen under the weight of ice and snow. Power lines were down in some places. It would take days for the town to fully recover. Catherine looked at the forest in the distance. Her shelter was somewhere under all that white. There was no way to know if it had survived or not. A wave of sadness hit her. That shelter had been her home for months. Henry seemed to sense her thoughts. You can stay here as long as you need, even after the snow melts. There is no rush. I cannot stay forever, Henry. Eventually, someone will notice. Then we will deal with that when it happens. But right now you have a home here if you want it. Catherine turned to look at him. His face was sincere and open. She realized something in that moment. This was not just about the storm. Henry was offering her something more permanent. A real place in his life. What about your neighbors? What about people asking questions? I will tell them you are a relative from overseas, that you are staying with me for a while. People will believe what they want to believe. And honestly, Catherine, I have spent 6 months hiding our friendship, and I am tired of it. You saved my life by just being there when I needed someone. I do not care what anyone else thinks. Catherine felt tears start to form in her eyes. I do not want to cause problems for you. You could never cause problems for me. You have only made my life better. Please stay, at least for the winter. We can figure out the rest later. Catherine looked back at the forest, then at the house. She thought about her shelter buried under snow, and then about the warm bedroom with the soft bed. She thought about being alone, and she thought about having a friend who cared about her. The choice was not difficult. Okay, she said. I will stay. At least for the winter. Henry's face broke into a huge smile. He pulled her into a tight hug, and she hugged him back just as tight. In the garage, Ember and Frost made rumbling sounds of approval. They were happy their family was staying together. As they stood there in the snowy backyard, Catherine realized something important. She had spent months thinking she was stranded on a strange world far from home. But maybe home was not a place. Maybe home was the people who cared about you and the connections you made. By that definition, she had found a new home right here. The universe worked in mysterious ways. She had lost her ship and her way back to Etherian. But she had gained something just as valuable. A friend who had become family. A purpose that gave her life meaning. A place where she belonged. Catherine looked up at the sky and silently thanked whatever forces had brought her to this planet. She had crashed here alone and scared, but she was not alone anymore. She had Henry. She had Ember and Frost. She had a home. And for the first time since leaving Etherian, Catherine felt truly at peace. The future was uncertain, and she did not know what would happen next. But she knew that whatever came, she would face it with the people she loved by her side. And that was enough.